Welcome to the debate. Today we are dissecting a genuine watershed moment in the history of international cricket. We're looking back at India's monumental victory over New Zealand in the 2026 ICC Men's T20 World Cup final.
Yeah, an unbelievable match.
Unbelievable is right. Set against the colossal backdrop of the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad, in front of, over 100,000 roaring fans? India didn't just win a cricket match. They became the first team ever to secure back-to-back T20 World Cups. And, they became the first host nation to lift the trophy. But I think perhaps most significantly, for anyone watching, they finally shattered that psychological trauma of their heartbreaking loss on this very same ground in the 2023 final.
Right. Getting that monkey off their back.
Exactly. And they did so with a highly emphatic 96-run victory. But an intellectual fault line really runs right through our understanding of this match. And that's what we're here to discuss. Did India secure this historic trophy primarily because of a revolutionary, completely fearless batting approach that redefined the sport, or was it the sheer, suffocating dominance of their bowling execution that truly put the game out of reach? So my position is that India's historic 255-run total, born from a new era of unselfish, hyper-aggressive batting, was the definitive factor that broke New Zealand's resolve before the chase even began.
And my position is that a massive total on a flat pitch is, it's merely theoretical until it's actually defended. Meaning, the true architect of the victory was the unparalleled bowling masterclass led by Jasprit Bumrah, which completely dismantled a dangerous opposition and turned what could have been a really tense shootout into an absolute 96-run rout.
Okay, so to me, the foundation of this incredible victory is undeniably the scoreboard. Setting a target of 255 in a World Cup final, that isn't just a statistical achievement. It represents a fundamental shift in how this format is played at the highest level. We witnessed a brand of unselfish, fearless cricket championed by the team management and Gautam Gambhir that completely rewrites how finals are meant to be played.
Historically, teams in finals play cautiously, right? They're terrified of losing early wickets and collapsing under the pressure. But not this Indian team. Look at Abhishek Sharma's explosive 18-ball 50 against Jacob Duffy right in the power play. Or look at Sanju Samson, the man of the series, stepping into the arena and anchoring the innings, yet still doing so with unbelievable aggression. They attacked relentlessly without any fear. This wasn't just about accumulating runs, it was about weaponizing the batting innings to utterly demoralize the opposition. The sheer audacity of the stroke play established a psychological barrier that New Zealand simply could not overcome.
I absolutely hear what you're saying about the sheer volume of runs. It was spectacular. But I look at it from a completely different angle. You can put 255 on the board, but if your bowling unit doesn't have the tactical discipline and raw skill to defend it, especially against a team as historically resilient as New Zealand, that total evaporates quickly. The stark reality is that the actual victory margin of 96 runs was forged by the bowlers. The undisputed hero of that final was Jasprit Bumrah.
Well, he was incredible, yeah.
Incredible. Taking 4 wickets for 15 runs in his 4 overs is a masterclass for the ages, and it rightfully earned him the Man of the Match honors. But, it wasn't a solo act. It was the pinpoint accuracy of the entire unit, including Akshar Patel and Varun Chakrabarti. When the pressure peaks in a World Cup final, the ball often feels like a bowling ball in a bowler's hand. To execute surgical bowling under that kind of immense pressure is what actually wins tournaments. The batters may have built a massive fortress, but the bowlers manned the walls and actively picked apart New Zealand's batting lineup piece by piece.
I completely disagree with that read on the power play, though, and I think you're letting the batter's contribution off the hook way too easily here. Let's look closely at those first 6 overs, which is really where I argue the match was actually won. India's batting in the power play didn't just score runs, it took the wind completely out of New Zealand's sails. By ruthlessly targeting Jacob Duffy, Abhishek Sharma backed Mitchell Santner into an impossible tactical corner. Reaching 76 for no loss in the first 6 overs of a final is staggering. It completely stripped New Zealand of their primary weapon, which is taking early wickets to induce panic.
But hold on, let's talk about what Sharma was actually doing to Duffy. Because I think people see an 18-ball 50 and just assume he was swinging wildly and getting lucky with the fielding restrictions.
Exactly. He wasn't swinging wildly at all.
I remember sitting there watching Sharma hit that third consecutive boundary off Duffy, and you could practically see Mitchell Santner's shoulders drop from 100 yards away. Sharma was premeditating the lengths based on the field settings. When Duffy tried to drag his length back to avoid being driven, Sharma was already rocking onto his back foot waiting to pull.
Right.
He dismantled the entire bowling strategy. It forced Santner to be entirely reactive. By the time that batting power play concluded, the game was fundamentally altered. New Zealand wasn't just chasing a run rate anymore. They were chasing a ghost.
Okay, but let me ask you this. If the batting was truly that revolutionary, and New Zealand was supposedly broken, like you say, why did the Indian bowlers still need to be absolutely perfect in the second innings? You talk about New Zealand being broken by Sharma, but let's remember who walked out to open the batting for the Kiwis: Finn Allen and Tim Seifert. These are aggressive, highly destructive openers. They are fully capable of exploiting those exact same fielding restrictions and flipping the script in a matter of 3 overs. On a pitch that good, a rapid power play start by the chasing team induces pure panic in the defending side, even with 255 on the board.
Sure, Allen and Seifert are dangerous on paper, but they never even got out of first gear.
And why didn't they? It wasn't because of the lingering memory of Abhishek Sharma's boundaries. It was the immediate, suffocating reality of the Indian spinners, specifically Aksar Patel. Let's talk about what Aksar actually did out there. Despite the threat posed by those explosive openers, Aksar stepped up in the power play with incredible courage. He finished with 3 for 23 in his 4 overs. It was the bowling power play that actively slammed the door shut.
I'll grant that Aksar's figures were fantastic, but isn't it significantly easier for a spinner to bowl aggressively when he has a 255-run cushion? He didn't have to worry about defending a small total. He could flight the ball and invite the big shot because the required run rate was already forcing Allen and Seifert to take massive risks.
You'd think so, but that's a misunderstanding of what makes stump-to-stump bowling so difficult under pressure. Aksar wasn't just tossing it up and hoping they made a mistake. When we say he bowled stump-to-stump, what we mean tactically is that he took the pitch entirely out of the equation. He fired the ball in flat, skidding it onto the pads and the stumps. If the batter misses, they are bowled or LW. It sounds simple, but executing that precise line, ball after ball, against guys who are actively trying to hit you into the stands requires a monumental amount of nerve. Aksar's variations neutralized the threat of Allen and Seifert, turning a potential shootout into a procession. He didn't ride the coattails of the batters. He actively diffused a bomb.
You bring up Aksar Patel, and I'm glad you did, because while his execution was brilliant, that execution was only made possible by the luxury afforded to them by the batting paradigm I'm talking about. To truly appreciate this, we have to look at Sanju Samson's role. He won Man of the Series for a reason. Nominally, he was the anchor of this innings, yet even as the slowest top-order batter on the day, he maintained a staggering strike rate of 197.
Which is incredible, but how does that relate to the bowlers?
Because it illustrates the death of the old T20 philosophy. People talk about the anchor role like it's a player who just survives to stop a collapse, striking at maybe 120 or 130 to protect the wicket. Samson completely redefined it. He anchored by rotation and by finding gaps, maintaining that 197 strike rate without taking reckless risks. He protected the wicket not by blocking, but by manipulating the field so bowlers couldn't settle into a rhythm. They literally changed the geometry of the field. By having Samson access the reverse sweep on one end and having someone like Shivam Dubey hit straight down the ground on the other, they made it mathematically impossible for Santner to set a defensive field. You simply don't have enough fielders to protect 360 degrees. Samson provided the perfect launch pad for those late cameos that pushed the score to 255. It's that structural shift where even your stabilizing force is hitting a boundary every 4 balls that won them the cup.
That is a very compelling breakdown of Samson's innings. But let's rewind to the death overs, because I think you're focusing heavily on India's late over batting success while ignoring the stark contrast in how both teams handled the bowling execution at the death. You bring up the late cameos that pushed India to 255. Let's look at why those cameos were allowed to happen versus why New Zealand's chase completely fizzled out at the end. Look at New Zealand's premier fast bowler, Lockie Ferguson.
He had a rough night, no doubt about it.
He did. He possesses extreme pace, right? But under the onslaught of Samson and Dubé, what did he do? He panicked. He resorted to ineffective slower balls that sat right up in the pitch and were severely punished by the Indian batters. He completely deviated from his strengths when the pressure escalated. Now contrast that exact scenario with Jasprit Bumrah. Under the exact same stadium lights, dealing with the exact same dew factor, Bumrah maintained lethal surgical accuracy.
I think it's fair to point out Ferguson's struggles, but comparing anyone to Jasprit Bumrah is almost unfair. Bumrah's an anomaly.
But that's exactly my point. That anomaly is why they won by 96 runs. Let's talk about the dew factor you just glossed over. When the night wears on in Hamadad, the outfield gets wet. The ball becomes like a bar of soap. Traditional seamers lose their grip, which is why Ferguson was bowling those loopy, ineffective, slower balls. He couldn't grip it properly to bowl his hard length. What makes Bumrah's 4 for 15 a masterclass isn't just his pace, it's his biomechanics.
Right.
Bumrah's hyperextended arm action naturally creates a trajectory that doesn't rely on traditional finger friction in the same way. He practically negates the dew factor. He didn't rely on gimmicks. He delivered unplayable, dipping Yorkers right at the base of the stumps. This proves a vital point. When the pressure of a final reaches its absolute peak, elite bowling execution triumphs over mere pace or theoretical run chase momentum. India had Jasprit Bumrah executing the hardest skill in cricket flawlessly, while New Zealand's bowlers lost their nerve.
I see why you lean so heavily on Bumrah's brilliance, and the biomechanics point is really fascinating. But let me give you a different perspective on the pressure you just mentioned. Because I think we cannot ignore the immense psychological weight of this specific final. We are talking about the Narendra Modi Stadium, over 100,000 fans screaming in unison. And let's not forget the context. This is the exact same venue where the entire nation suffered an agonizing defeat in the 2023 World Cup final against Australia. The ghosts of that match were heavily present. The trauma was real, both for the fans in the stands and the players on the pitch.
It was definitely a highly charged atmosphere.
Highly charged is an understatement. It was a pressure cooker. And the only antidote to that level of paralyzing pressure was the fearless batting approach we witnessed from ball one. Think about it. If India had come out to bat and lost early wickets, or played cautiously to build an innings the traditional way, the crowd would have grown tense. You would have felt the anxiety radiating from the stands. Instead, by coming out and constantly hitting boundaries, the Indian batters didn't just score runs, they dictated the emotional temperature of the entire stadium.
So you're arguing the batting was basically crowd control.
Exactly. They whipped the crowd into an absolute frenzy. Every boundary acted as a release valve for the anxiety of the crowd, and in turn it transferred all of that psychological pressure squarely onto the shoulders of the Kiwis. The sound of 100,000 people cheering isn't just noise, it's a physical weight on the fielding side. It was the uninhibited freedom of the batters that allowed the team to rise above the occasion rather than be crushed by the memories of 2023. They batted the demons away.
I understand the poetry of that, and it paints a great picture. But the pressure of a crowd that size is a double-edged sword, and it cuts the bowlers just as deeply, if not more so. Yes, the batters set a joyous tone, but defending a massive total in a stadium echoing with 100,000 people chanting Bumrah, Bumrah, requires absolute ice in the veins.
How is it harder for the bowlers when they have a massive total backing them in the crowd chanting their names? Doesn't that just give them adrenaline?
That adrenaline is precisely the danger. It is incredibly easy for a fast bowler to get carried away by that emotion. You hear your name roaring around a coliseum, the adrenaline spikes, and suddenly you try to bowl 10 kilometers faster than you normally do. You lose your line, you lose your length, you lose your discipline, and suddenly you're leaking runs. We've seen it happen to great bowlers in high-pressure finals before. Holding a dangerous New Zealand side to just 159 runs to secure a 96-run victory isn't just about riding the crowd's wave. It's a testament to the profound emotional control of the Indian bowlers.
I'll concede that staying disciplined amid that chaos takes remarkable focus.
It takes total mastery. Furthermore, if you pull back and look at the tournament as a whole, it wasn't just this one match. Bumrah and Varun Chakravarti finished as the top 2 wicket takers of the entire World Cup. This final wasn't some one-off bowling performance masked by a big batting total. Their systematic bowling superiority was the true unwavering constant of the entire campaign. When the batters occasionally faltered in the earlier round on trickier pitches in the US and the Caribbean, it was this exact bowling unit that bailed them out. If we're talking about who won the World Cup, the bowlers were the undeniable bedrock of the team's success from day one to the final over.
You make a very strong case for the consistency of the bowling unit throughout the tournament. But to pull our thoughts back to this specific, historic final, my stance remains that the definitive factor was the monumental 255-run benchmark. The team fundamentally shifted how a T20 innings is constructed. They proved that a culture of unselfish, hyper-aggressive batting, where every player from the opener to the so-called anchor is willing to risk their wicket for the team's momentum, can dismantle even the most disciplined opposition. The way Abhishek Sharma attacked the power play and the way Samson manipulated the field to maintain a 197 strike rate broke the psychological resolve of New Zealand. They laid the ghosts of 2023 to rest with the back.
And I will maintain that a massive score on the board is an invitation, not a conclusion. It is merely theoretical until it is defended. The ultimate difference makers in this 96-run victory were Jasprit Bumrah's unbelievable figures of 4 for 15, Axar Patel's stump-to-stump suffocation in the power play, and the ice-cold discipline of the entire bowling unit. They were the ones who stepped into the cauldron of the second innings, absorbed the massive pressure of the stadium, and executed their skills with surgical precision, even battling the dew factor. They proved that in the crucible of a World Cup final, elite bowling remains the ultimate currency of victory.
Well, despite our different lenses on exactly how this final was tipped, I think we both find strong agreement on the broader picture. This Indian team, masterfully led by Surya Kumar Yadav, genuinely represents a historical peak in T20 cricket. What they've achieved with this back-to-back championship is unprecedented. And they achieved it by seamlessly blending that hyper-aggressive, fearless batting philosophy with an elite, highly tactical bowling attack.
Absolutely. It really is the harmonization of those two disciplines that makes them undisputed champions. Examining this match through both the evolution of their modern batting geometry and the timeless necessity of their world-class bowling execution gives us a much richer understanding of their dominance.
There is certainly a wealth of tactical nuance left to explore in the evolution of this Indian squad, from their stroke play to their biomechanics. But for today, we leave it to you, the listener, to weigh the evidence. You've heard the arguments for the batting paradigm shift in the bowling masterclass. Form your own conclusion about which discipline ultimately secured the trophy. Thank you for joining us on the debate.